It's not how many times you get shot down, 16 in this case, it's how many times you get back up. We're going to find out what that's all about in the hangar. Hi, welcome to In the Hangar. I'm Dan Milliken.
And I'm Christy Wong. And today's episode is brought to you by some really great sponsors, one of which is Flying Eyes. They're probably my favorite.
Yeah, you were a customer before they sponsored us.
I know, absolutely. But we're going to talk about them later. We'll have links in the description below. I need to know about this. Shot down 16 times?
Well, it makes it sound like you're a bad pilot. You're like probably one of the best pilots ever. Hugh Mills, thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
So, Hugh, well, we just opened up the can of worms there. Shot down 16 times. All at once?
Well, I like to tell people it was not all at once. That was over 3 tours in combat in Vietnam.
Wow. And
about 5 times a tour.
Wow. Well, and you were flying scouts, which is, by nature, you're basically bait, right? You're trying... No?
You know, they used to call it trolling with a loach.
Trolling. Okay. Well, there we go.
Loach pilots didn't like that, but Cobra pilots thought that was funny. You are in an environment where you're low and slow and very close to the enemy troops.
On purpose.
Yeah, and when they fire, you can now drop smoke and tell the Cobra where to go send the rockets.
Well, in some units, they would do that. In our unit, we would attack at that point.
Right, and because I've been reading your book, and what amazed me in your book, and I'm doing this interview all wrong because we should have gone back to, you were born here or there and how you got into everything, but we're just
I want to hear about the helicopters getting shot down.
Yeah, we're all into it now. We'll get to that later, so we'll go out of order. When I read your book, at the time you went into the unit, by the way, you were 20 years old, which is amazing to me, and you're a Loach pilot. You wanted to be a Loach pilot. They were giving you the slicks at the time.
Yeah, I had done my initial orientation flight for Army Flight School right out of OCS at Fort Knox. And the requirement then was you had to take a ride in an Army aircraft, and if it didn't scare you to death and you didn't get sick, that qualified you to go to flight school.
That was it?
Well, more or less.
Nice.
And I did that in an OH-6, which was brand new at the time, brand new in the system, 1968. And I loved the aircraft, just loved it. It was small, it was extremely fast, very nimble, the most nimble aircraft in the Army. And so the obvious move would be to go into a scout ship. And ultimately, I was able to finagle my way into command of the scout platoon after 2 months.
When you got to the scout platoon, there was a, whatever you call it, a design where they put the minigun, which is an amazing gun, on the Loaches, but your scout squadron were not using them.
That's correct. Part of the OVM, or on-vehicle material, that came with the OH-6 was an XM-27 minigun, which mounted in the back and stuck out the left side. And the characteristics that the troop flew, I was in an air cavalry troop of the 1st Infantry Division, D Troop, 1st Squadron, 4th Cavalry. And they flew with 2 people in the front, 1 gunner in the back. The guy in the left front was an observer. My opinion, having flown scouts for a month or so, was that the guy in the left seat didn't bring any value added to the situation, because in a concentric right-hand turn constantly as we flew, that guy's up in the air, couldn't see anything, couldn't engage the enemy really if he needed to, and they always got sick and threw up. So,
because they're in a constant right turn.
Turn. Spatial orientation was difficult. So I said, let's can the observer, give me the minigun, and instead of running when I'm shot at, I'm going to attack. And that changed the whole tactics of the unit for the remainder of the war.
So what was it like the first time you got shot down?
Well, the first time I got shot down, I took a .50 caliber round through the leading edge of one of the main rotor blades, split the spar.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Wow.
And the vibration was significant.
Yeah, I would think.
I could barely see, and I knew that right in front of me was an open rice paddy, and so I just continued straight ahead and bellied into an open rice paddy, hit a berm, took the skids off, and both of us crawled out, and then waited for somebody to come get us.
Is that the story that opens the book? So you guys had, then the Viet Cong came on you and you had to fire and...
Yeah, we were out in the middle of an open rice paddy.
Right, yeah.
I went down. My Cobra had been working for a while. He was almost out of ammo. And after covering us for about 15 minutes, he was...
Oh, that's right. He did fake runs.
He did. Dean Shiner, Captain
Yes.
Dean Shiner, did fake gun runs over the top of the enemy who were about 75 yards away. And when he did about the third run without expending ordnance, they got the idea he's out of ammo. And they started moving toward us, and Colonel Haldane, the 2nd Brigade commander of the 1st Infantry Division, came in a HUGH.
Because he just happened to be in the area.
Just happened to be coming down Highway 13 and saw all this activity, and he landed, and we jumped on and went home with him.
All right, that was shot down number 1.
Oh my gosh. So, and you decided that this was a good idea and to keep going. So you...
Well, when you're 20 years old, I was a first lieutenant. I was commissioned when I was 19 years old. Very unusual for the time.
Yeah.
I was a first lieutenant. I was in command of a platoon of 10 aircraft, 20 people. I was aggressive. I figured that's what I wanted to do, and I was single. Big difference.
Right.
Married guys, we didn't have married guys in the Scouts. So I was indoctrinated to do that kind of work, and I enjoyed it.
So you were doing all this before you could even legally drink?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I couldn't rent a car. But I could fly a combat aircraft.
And get shot down and do some shooting back.
And interestingly, it never mattered because I have never been a drinker. I don't drink alcohol. Never did.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I got to be friends with a helicopter pilot. What's the air unit that flies for DevGru? 160.
It's 160th
160.
Special Operations Aviation Regiment.
Yeah, so he was in that, and I remember he would tell the story of how they sighted in their guns was with a wax pencil on the canopy.
Same way we did, and
I read that in your book.
They got that from us. Yeah.
Yeah, I read that in your book, and I went, "Oh wow!" So, and they said that they could knock a beer can off of from 200 whatever.
Well, the 160th guys are notorious liars. But the Scouts could do that. We could do that.
All right. Fair enough.
The system actually came with a sight that swung out in front of you.
And it got in your visual way.
It got in your way. If you had to put the aircraft down hard, you'd put it in your face. And so we got rid of them. And basically, if you elevate the minigun so that the top barrel just shows above the floor on the left side, and then make a grease pencil mark 6 inches up off the lateral, you're right there.
Wow.
And at 4,000 rounds a minute, you don't have to be anything but close.
One of the most moving parts of the book was early on when you were there, and early on in your scout missions. I think it was even one of your first missions, maybe not. You stuck around with an infantry unit that was having problems, that had some guys, almost like the We Were Soldiers kind of situation, where they had some guys that were stuck and the rest of the platoon couldn't get to them.
Correct.
And you hung out there all day long to the point where the Loach couldn't fly at night, and it was dusk coming down, and you finally did a desperation move. They got their guys, and it all worked. And I was like, wow, that's an incredible story. But then you get called and sent to the principal's office, as it were.
Yeah, I got in trouble for that.
Talk about that.
Well,
Well, no, I was not in trouble. You thought you were going to get in trouble.
I thought I was in serious trouble, and I believe it was the next day or the second day, we were out flying a mission, got called to the rear and told to go to the division headquarters at HUGH and stand by for the assistant division commander. I said, oh, shoot. And I had done something 2 days before that probably would have caused that. But we were at a fire base, and there was an infantry unit at that fire base, and they were all standing around in formation. And my crew chief and I landed and walked over, and I asked a guy, what's going on? He said, I have no idea. Some kind of bigwig's coming.
Uh-oh.
And I knew it wasn't me. I was
Right.
the first lieutenant. And the ADC showed up, and this major walked over and says, Lieutenant Mills, you go stand over there. And I got my first award, a Distinguished Flying Cross, which was an impact award recommended by those guys in that unit. And to me, it's the most cherished thing I've got.
Wow.
What is for the audience that doesn't know, what is an impact award? Because that's significant.
Normally, an award, if you're recommended for a DFC or a Silver Star or something, it goes through channels to be approved at various levels. It takes several months to years for the Medal of Honor. This was done overnight. So it was of significant interest to the guys on the ground, and I was really flattered by that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see why that. Is that your most cherished?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, clearly.
I have a question. Okay, so you've been shot down 16 times. What was your scariest moment?
The 15 were in a OH-6. One was in a Cobra. It was the Cobra.
Okay, what happened?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was on my second tour in Vietnam. I had gone back a second tour as a Cobra pilot. And I got a call from a forward air controller in an OV-10, a FAC, Air Force FAC. And he said, we've got an anti-aircraft gun over here on the Laotian border, and he's shooting at us, and I don't have any fast movers. Are there any Army aircraft in the area? He came up on guard. And I answered up and said, Charlie Horse 38, I'm about 6 miles south of Phu Bai. And he said, I'm on the 278 off of channel 123 for 76. And my co-pilot, who was a new kid, goes, what the hell does that mean? Because we don't have TACANs in Army aircraft. I said, he's 273 degrees off of Da Nang for 76 miles. Just draw a map and we'll go there. And we got over the area. I could see the anti-aircraft gun was a 14.5. I could see the donut where the gun was. The emplacement was pretty easy to tell. And so I told my wingman, Bob Smith, I said, I'm going to go in first. When I break, you follow me with rockets, cover my break. I was flying a 20 ship, which is a Vulcan cannon on the left wing of a Cobra. So I started with Vulcan, 20 millimeter rotary cannon, and I'm putting bullets all over the gun position. And I reached down and I flipped to the inboard pods, which was my left pod inboard on the, right inboard, which had flechettes in it. And I fired one flechette out of that pod, which burst, red dye, I could see the burst. And I fired the second round. And when I fired the second round, the round ignited but did not leave the tube. So what I had was a JADO bottle on my right wing. It was called a hang fire. Very, very rare. And so all of a sudden, I'm in about an 80-degree dive with a rocket on my right side pushing me. And I'm trying to counter that with tail rotor. And all of a sudden, the tail rotor goes completely loose. I lost the tail rotor, the vertical tail of the aircraft, the tail aft of the exhaust, everything left the aircraft. So we were in a significant shift of CG, is the way I like to describe it.
At what altitude?
Started at 5,000.
Oh my God! How did you survive that?
Well, I was killed.
Oh my God!
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, the tension just went away.
That's your fault. But we were at 5,000 feet in the mountainous area west of Phu Bai. And the minute you lose your tail rotor, the fuselage goes opposite the main rotor. So the main rotor is going to the left, fuselage is going to the right. And it's spinning like a tilt-a-whirl at a carnival. And we're still going down at 80 degrees and about 90 knots. And my wingman right beside me at a certain point, I'm just trying to keep it from going over on its back. Frankly, I was not able to process all that. I got the stick in my stomach. And Bob Smith said, pull it, damn it, pull it. And I pulled the collective all the way to the top. Rotation stopped. We hit the trees, rolled over, and then went about another 250 feet through triple canopy jungle. And
so I guess that all cushioned.
Well, yeah, it's
if
relative.
You call it that.
It's
Yeah.
Relative.
The aircraft came to rest on its right side. When I woke up, I felt a really burning pain in my leg, and I looked up, and my left boot was pressing against my face right here. My left knee was against the instrument panel, which had collapsed.
Gnarly.
I had a fractured left leg. My front seater, John Bryant, had a broken neck and a broken back, and so he was not able to leave the aircraft. I basically pulled the seat belt, fell out of the airplane, which I didn't realize was nearly upside down. And then after a bit of time, I regained some sense of myself, got out my Prick 10 survival radio and started talking to my wingman. And he was trying to round up somebody to come get us. Army aircraft in 72 and I Corps didn't have hoists. So to get out, it would have taken the Air Force. So the Air Force assets that came to get us came out of Da Nang and Thailand. Nakhon Phanom, Thailand. I had Sky Raiders. I had 2 Jolly Greens. The Army brought out 3. They found 3 Rangers that didn't have anything to do at that point in time. They threw them on a HUGH, brought them out to us, repelled them in to where we were, and they became my ground security force.
Wow.
We had landed in the middle of the enemy force.
Right.
And I believe their intent was to use us to get the rescue aircraft to come in and then take on the rescue aircraft. But the package that the Air Force brought was significant. 5 Sky Raiders fully loaded.
Wow.
Cluster bombs, Mark 47 smokes, rockets, 20 millimeter. Couldn't use fast movers in close to us because the ordnance was too heavy, but the soft ordnance carried on a Sky Raider is significant. Mm-hmm. They carry more ordnance than a B-17.
Wow.
So after a period of time when the area was sanitized, we'd been down about a day. And
with your leg the way it is.
Yeah.
And your co-pilot, your front seater.
Morphine is a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Oh, man.
So originally they had decided to bring us out quicker. There was ground fire. They were concerned about that, so it delayed the rescue for a time. And then ultimately a Jolly Green came in, dropped a PJ, Harvey J. Picklesheimer. What a wonderful name for a pararescue.
It sounds like a song.
I know, it's awful. But Harvey came down on the jungle penetrator. He cut John out of the aircraft, hoisted him on a Stokes, hoisted me on a Stokes litter, and then they put a jungle penetrator down and brought the Rangers out 2 at a time, with Harvey coming out last. So John and I were saved 700 and 701 for the Air Rescue Service in Southeast Asia.
Wow. So after all of that, why did you stay for 3 tours?
Well, that was only my second tour.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you stayed for
You came back for a third.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't enough.
And what ended up with John? Did he make it?
John made it. It ended his military career, but he years later would walk, and he lives in Belize now, of all places.
Oh, wow.
It's warm there.
But it was coming back there was a reason for that. When I came out of my first tour in Vietnam, went home, married the high school sweetheart, and then Army officers in those days, commissioned officers, were basic branch and aviation. Aviation was a specialty. Today's aviation officer, that's all they do is fly. When I was coming up, I was an armored officer, so I had to do ground tours as well. I had to tour on the ground and in the air, and on the ground and in the air. So I was headed off to Germany to command a tank company on the East German border. And so married the high school sweetheart, we went to Germany, and then 7 months later, she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer.
Oh, no.
Age 22. We went to Brooke Army Medical Center, right down the road in San Antonio, and in October of 70, and then she passed away on the 1st of February, about 5 months later. And so after 2 months of coming out of the BOQ, the Bachelor Officer Quarters, and looking at Brooke Army Medical Center where she died, I just got on the phone and called Aviation Branch and said, let me go back to Vietnam. And they knew. I mean, they take care of you. And they said, do you want to school? And I said, yeah, let me fly Cobras. So they sent me to Cobra School, which I attended at Hunter Army Airfield in Savannah. And then when that tour ended, they said, second tour's over, you're going home. I said, I really would prefer to stay. So I extended and did another year.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that's how that happened.
Now, I know that in the Army today, if you're flying, a lot of times you're a warrant officer, but you were a commissioned officer.
We were called RLOs, real live officers.
Real
You
live
got warrant officers and RLOs.
Okay.
I went to OCS, and then when I went through flight school, I was a second lieutenant. I didn't have to put up with all the stuff the poor warrants put up with. It's like going to flight school and being an OCS at the same time. I lived off post. I got full pay, including flight pay. They lived on post. They had to go home at night to TAC officers and inspections and all that stuff. I went to Weatherford and partied. A big difference.
Camp Walters?
Walters, Texas, yeah.
Yeah.
And then to Fort Rucker for the advanced phase. And commissioned officers command the platoons. Warrant officers make up the brunt of the aviation force. They're the aviation professionals, absolutely. They fly their entire career.
So in your first tour, and you're a commissioned officer, an RLO, how many of the other scout pilots in your platoon were RLOs?
Just me.
Just you?
Just me.
And that's pretty normal?
Yeah, the positions, the platoon commander position is a captain. There weren't any captains that wanted to command the scout platoon. I was anxious to do that. And then about July of '69, my dear friend Rod Willis came in from flight school, also a lieutenant, infantry branch. I was armor, and he became my section leader. And then everybody else was a warrant officer. So usually you'll have up to 2 commissioned officers in a platoon. Everybody else is a warrant.
After the Army, what'd you do?
Well, I wanted to do something different, so I went to the Kansas City Police Department and flew OH-6s for 15 years.
So you stayed in the OH-6s?
Same
So you
aircraft.
stayed in the Loach?
Yeah.
Actually, LESO program, Law Enforcement Support Office, former Army OH-6s given to law enforcement.
Oh, nice.
And the helicopter unit in the KCPD, Kansas City, was very well established since '69. And initially HUGH 300C models, and then while I was there, I assisted them in getting the OH-6 on board, which matured into the MD 500s that they fly today.
I really want to get my rotor added to my fixed wing stuff.
I'm scared
Christy
to death.
is scared to death.
Scared to death of helicopters.
Oh, well, you know, helicopters, if you lose an engine and a fixed wing, you're in serious trouble.
You're a
Oh, you just
glider.
glide.
You're a glider. You're not going to go that far. In a helicopter, I just look for where I want to go, and then I carry my own cushion, auto rotation, with me. And I can, you can put a helicopter inside a tennis court.
Still sounds worse. I don't know why.
Well, I do see the point that you need a smaller footprint on the ground
That's
to
true.
put it safely
I agree
down.
with that.
Yeah.
I mean, but the whole, the rotor's going this way, you're going that way, that sounds terrifying.
Well, that's only if you lose your tail rotor.
I mean, that's only if.
That's
so.
only if your rockets stick in the tube and
Yeah.
Yeah, so
and
you
burn
shot
off your
yourself
tail.
down, basically.
Helicopters.
Oh, don't tell him that.
Helicopters are harder to fly. I'm multi-engine, fixed-wing rated as well.
Okay, that was another question I had.
I flew Super King Airs for the Army, and then a number of other fixed-wing aircraft in the various assignments. I was the Army representative to the FAA. I was the
how fun.
liaison to the Transportation Department for the last 8 years of the Army. I did counter-narcotics operations on the south border. It's harder to fly. I don't know, what do you normally solo in fixed wing when you start?
Like a 172.
yeah.
I mean, how many hours?
To solo, I soloed 12, 11.
Like, usually around 20
No, I
or
soloed
so.
Yeah.
And I soloed in 9 hours in a helicopter and then flew around Fort Walters with an IP on occasion and by myself on occasion. They'd send you out to go into confined areas by yourself. And then by the time you graduated from flight school, we would leave with about 210 hours rotary wing.
Okay, that's a
A
lot.
commercial ticket, military competency. but limited instrument training in those days. I didn't get an instrument ticket till much later.
Oh, interesting.
And we were flying around IMC and non-IFR certified aircraft on a daily basis, in some cases just to get home.
How long ago did you write your book?
I started the book after my wife had passed away.
Oh, okay.
And then I put it aside for a time. And I started writing again, that was 1970, and I started writing again in earnest in 1990.
Okay.
And it was picked up by Presidio Press in 1992, and then later picked up again by Random House.
And it's available now?
Oh, sure. Yeah, Amazon.com, low-level hell.
All right. Well, guys, I have to tell you that I only got the book a few days ago, and I'm halfway through. It is hard to put it down. It's just amazing to hear the stories. Hugh, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
So
thank you. Good to see you.
All right, guys, thank you for watching. And, we're made possible by our sponsors like 67 Designs, 67D.com, Marshall Protective Services, MPSProtects.com, ClemensInsurance.net, Z-Vision, the brightest landing taxi lights out there, Colton Mortgage at ColtonTakingOff.com, and, of course, Flying Eyes that Christy mentioned at the beginning.
All right, guys, thank you so much. Of course, like, subscribe, share our videos, leave comments, fly safe, and we'll see you guys next time.
In the hangar.